he has no ill effect on her. She was a grusha, okay? She was never eligible to marry a kohen, right? Now she'll be a grusha and a chalutza. It has no effect on her. If he were to give chalitza to the other woman who was never a grusha, that would mean that now he's causing her to become invalidated from marrying a kohen. Okay, and the Gemara uses the phrase here on the Gemara says about maybe a drop more than 10 lines down. Mishum Rav Yosef, starting at the beginning of the line. The Amar of Yosef, Kan Shana Rabbi taught regarding this, Lo Yishboch Adam Meiboro Va'acherim Tzvichim Lahem, that a person should not spit in the well. He should not spill out his well water when other people will need it as well. Meaning that he should not give chalitza to the woman who is eligible to marry a kohen and thus spoil her from being able to marry a kohen when he has the option of giving chalitza to the woman who is already a grusha and will have no effect on her. So it's an interesting concept that the Gemara brings out. This idea of lo yishboch adam meiboro v'acherim tzvichim lahem, he should not cause this woman to be invalidated from marrying a kohen. Okay, so I want to go on to the case here of going down a few lines to Amar Mar Ukva Amar Shmuel. So it's about a little above halfway down on the Gemara. The Gemara talks about a case here of a tsaras mima'enes. Okay, so just a little background on a mima'enes. The Chachamim instituted a concept as follows: that midoraisa, a father has the right to accept kiddushin, to marry off his daughter, to accept kiddushin on behalf of his daughter. So he can accept kiddushin from a man to marry his daughter who is a ketana, his daughter who is a minor, and that kiddushin is valid, and it's a kiddushin d'oraisa. She's considered a married woman just like any other one. And if they want to end that marriage, she needs a get just like any other woman. Midra Banan, the Chachamim instituted that, and this was done for the sake of the daughter, by the father arranging for this girl to have a marriage. He's ensuring her future. Now the Chachamim instituted that if you have a yesoma, so a girl is an orphan, so the father passed away, there's nobody to take care of her. So we're left with her mother and her brothers, potentially. Now, the Chachamim gave the power to her mother and her brothers to also accept kiddushin on her behalf, to marry her off. However, this is only a kiddushin d'Rabbanan, okay? Because it's an institution by the Chachamim. They don't have the ability to create a kiddushin d'Oraisa, so it's a kiddushin d'Rabbanan. And the Chachamim instituted that if this girl wants to opt out of this marriage, she has the ability to do so, and she does something called miyun. Miyun means literally a refusal. So she refuses the marriage. She can say at any point during the marriage, until she becomes a gedola, at any point until she becomes an adult, she can say that I no longer want to be married to this man. And in the case of miyun, the marriage is annulled. So it's not like gerushin where they were married and then the marriage ends with the divorce. With miyun, it's as if the marriage never existed. Okay, so again, this is a creation by the Chachamim. Miyun obviously can't work on a kiddushin d'oraisa. In the case of a d'oraisa marriage, it only works in this case of a kiddushin d'Rabbanan, and that's the institution that the Chachamim said of miyun. Okay, so the Gemara now wants to deal with cases of, let's say you had a kiddushin d'Rabbanan, which now falls to yibum. So you had a mima'enes, meaning she was married to, she was a katana, married off by her mother or her brothers to this man who then dies, and now she falls to his brother for yibum. So Amar Ma'ukva Amar Shmuel Tsaras Mima'enes Asura. Okay, so he says as follows: let's say you had a case where, again, you had this girl married off by her mother or her brothers to this man who then dies, and she falls to yibum. However, instead of opting in for yibum, she decides that she's going to opt out of the marriage. She's going to perform miyun. Okay, so she's going to opt out of the marriage, and she's going to perform miyun, which means she doesn't require yibum or chalitza any longer, because the original marriage is now annulled. It's like it never existed. Okay, but again, by performing miyun, even when she's performing miyun, she can perform it also with the yavam. So she can stand up and say to the yavam, I refuse to go through with yibum because I am annulling the marriage in its entirety from the beginning. So the Gemara says that saras mima'enes, if such a case occurs, with this girl who now performs miyun, she refuses at the time of Yibum, her tzara, if there was another wife, if she has a co-wife, tzaras mima'enes asura, then the co-wife is also forbidden, and you cannot perform Yibum on the co-wife. Now asks the Gemara, Laman, to whom are we saying that she's forbidden? Right now, if you'll tell me she's forbidden to the brothers, hashta higufa sharia. Right. So says the Gemara. Let's stop and think for a moment. Right. We're talking about a case where what prevents her from marrying the brothers, because of the Torah says the Isser of Eshesach. Right. She's married to a person's brother. She becomes an ereva. She's forbidden to marry her husband's brothers. Right. But in the case of miyun, we're saying that the marriage gets annulled. So it's like the marriage never existed, right? So if you had a case of, if you have, let's say, forget about Yibum. You had a regular case. You have a girl who's married off by her mother or her brothers. She marries an individual. And then after a year or whatever it is, she performs miyun, and she says that she no longer wants to be married to him. That marriage is annulled. When she becomes a gedola, right, a few years later, she's permitted to marry this person's brother. Why? Because she was never married to the original one. Because the original marriage was annulled. It's like it never existed. So she can go ahead and marry his brother now, right? Because there's no problem of Eshesach, because the original marriage is annulled. It's like it never existed at all. Now, so asks the Gemara, right? If that's the case, that when miyun, the halacha is, it's like the original marriage never existed, how can we possibly say, right, in our Gemara, that the tzara will be forbidden to marry one of the other brothers, right? Or she would be forbidden. She herself can marry one of the brothers. So answers the Gemara. So says the Gemara's moving down a little bit in the Gemara. The Gemara says a concept as follows, that the distinction is as follows. If she performs miyun with the original husband, okay, so that means that before the husband died, she performed miyun and she opted out of the marriage. Okay, so then of course the marriage is batal, and there's no yibum whatsoever, of course, because she's not, and her tzara would be totally permitted. Okay, however, if she performs miyun to the yavam, okay, so that means that she stayed with her original husband until he died. Okay, now he dies, and she falls to the yavam, and she doesn't want to go through with Yibum. So she wants to opt out. She doesn't want Chalitza. So she says, I'm refusing this marriage, right? Which means that she's saying to the Yavam, I'm refusing this marriage. Now, the actual effect of it is that the original marriage is batal. It's like it never happened. So there's no Yibum because she was never married to the brother to begin with. However, the Chacham made a gzeira. The Chacham were concerned that it looks like, okay, it appears as if there was an original marriage, because if there was no original marriage, how did she fall to the Yavam? So the very fact that she went through the whole marriage till her original husband died, right, without canceling that marriage, now she falls to Yibum, right, and she's only opting out from the Yavam, it appears as if the original marriage actually took effect, and it was there, and therefore the Chacham instituted that she is forbidden to the Yavam. And not only is she going to be forbidden to the Yavam, but she'll be forbidden to the brothers as well. Not only her, but the tzara as well, because it appears like there was an original marriage. And since it appears like there was an original marriage, we're concerned that she looks like an Eshesach, and therefore she's going to be forbidden. Okay. So the Gemara goes with another case here that I want to discuss before we move to Amud Beis. Okay, the Gemara talks about a case as follows. Okay, if Asi says, the Gemara talks about a case of a tsaras islandess. And this is about 5 lines above where the lines get wide. So the Gemara talks about a case of an islandess. So an islandess is a woman whose body never matures. so she never physically never reaches puberty, and her body remains like a child, and she's not capable, obviously not capable of having children at all. But she's not like an akara, who's a woman who's barren, but physically is capable of having children. This is a woman whose body is incapable of having children. It never matures at all. So if if a man had a wife who was an islandess, okay, and he also had another wife as well. He had a co-wife, and now he dies. So now they fall for yibum. Okay, so Amar Rav Asi says tzaras islandess asura. Okay, shenemar v'hoya abachor asher teled, because the Torah says that you should perform yibum in order that the child that will be born, and we learn out from there, prat la'ilonus she'eno yoledes. It's excluding an islandess because she's not capable of having children, which means that the entire purpose of having yibum, right, is canceled out. Right? There's no point in having yibum if she's not going to be able to bear any children. Okay, so she's excluded from yibum. Okay, and therefore, since she's excluded from yibum, she falls back on the original isser of eshesach. Right, she's like his brother's wife. There's no mitzvah of yibum whatsoever, so she's an eshesach. She's forbidden as one of the arayos. So she's forbidden as an isser kares. Okay. Now we'll see where this goes in a moment. So if Sheshes asks, okay, there's another case as follows. If you have shlosha achin nesuin shalosh nashim, nachrios, you had three brothers, each one was married to a woman, right? So far a normal case. Each one is married to a woman, no relation to each other. Umeis echad mehem, va'asa b'sheni maimar, umeis. And one of the brothers dies. Okay, so one of the brothers dies, that means his wife falls to yibum. Right, so far everything's simple. She falls to yibum. We know that the Chachamim instituted that before we actually perform yibum, we perform a kiddushin d'Rabbanan called maimar, right, which creates a quasi kiddushin towards the yavam. And then, so one of the brothers went ahead and did maimar, but before he actually followed through on the yibum, right, he died. Okay, so the second brother now dies after performing maimar on the first brother's wife. So now we have two women that fall to the third brother for yibum. One is the actual wife, and one is the yevama who had maimar. So says the Gemara, Harei elu choltzos v'lo mesyabmos, they require chalitza, and he may not perform yibum. Shenemar umeis achad mehem, yevamo yavo aleha. So the Torah says if one of the brothers will die, the yavam shall perform yibum on her. Misha Allah zikas yavam echad v'lo zikas shnei yavamim. So that's teaching me that yibum can only be done if there is a zika from one marriage. Okay? But here in this case, we actually have a zika from a quasi zika from two marriages. We have the original zikas yibum from the first husband, who was her real husband, but then the second one performed maimar. Right now, maimar is a kiddushin d'Rabbanan. Okay, so this kiddushin d'Rabbanan creates a connection to the yavam, which then transfers over. So she actually is coming from two marriages to the third yavam, and in that case, she's excluded from yibum, and she's not eligible for yibum. For katani Allah, and we said about this, Amar of Yosef, zuhi tzaras eshes ach me'av she'isr nefila garamla. So Rav Yosef says this is very interesting, that the one who came from the third brother, so she now has zika from two yavam, so from two marriages, so she's excluded from yibum. Now, once she's excluded from yibum, she's now forbidden as an eshesach. That means that the tzara, the co-wife, is what we would call a tzaras erva. She's a tzara of an eshesach, right? She's a co-wife to a woman who's forbidden because of eshesach. Now, says Rav Yosef, this is the only place where we will find, right, that you can actually have an erva of eshesach that applies in the case of yibum, because in every case of yibum, we're automatically talking about the brother's wife, right? And obviously, that's where the Torah is coming to say that she's permitted, because that's exactly where the Torah is prescribing yibum. So you never have a case where eshesach applies, except for this case, because we excluded her from yibum, right? But says Rav Yosef, "V'lo matzinu b'chol Torah kula kegonzos." So we don't find this case actually in the Torah. Why don't we find this case in the Torah? Because in the Torah, Maimer does not exist at all. Maimer was a Rabbanan creation. So as far as the Torah is concerned, she's really only falling from her original husband. The fact that the middle brother performed Maimer is irrelevant. It's inconsequential because it takes no effect midoraisa. So what's preventing her from falling to Yibum? The Maimer, which is the Rabbanan, which means that on a D'Rabbanan level, she's excluded from Yibum. And on a D'Rabbanan level, she's going to be considered to be an Eishes Ach. And because of that, she's going to cancel out not only herself, but she's going to cancel out her co-wife as well, her tzara, that we don't allow her tzara to have Yibum either, because she's considered to be like the co-wife of an erva, like the co-wife of an Eishes Ach. Now, says the Gemara that the same halacha will apply in the case of a tzaras islandess as well. Okay. If you have, again, the man is married to a woman who's an islandess, she's not capable of children. He also has another wife, right? There's a co-wife as well. Okay. Now he dies, they fall to Yibum. But the islandess is excluded from Yibum. The Torah excludes her from the whole mitzvah of Yibum. If she's excluded from Yibum, that means she remains with the prohibition of being an Eishes Ach. She remains with the prohibition of being the brother's wife. Okay, and that's on a Doraisa level. So she remains a Eishes Ach, and on a Doraisa level, she's an Eishes Ach. She's forbidden to the Yavam, and therefore her tzara, the co-wife, is considered a tzaras erva. Is considered a tzaras erva. She's considered to be the co-wife of an erva, and she's going to be excluded from Yibum as well. Which is, if you think about it, it's amazing because the co-wife herself is an Eishes Ach, right? She is, of course, the brother's wife. And the Torah said a brother's wife is permitted, right, for Yibum, because that's exactly the case of Yibum. Nevertheless, because of her co-wife, who is not eligible for Yibum, she's going to get excluded as well. Okay? So it's a very interesting play where it comes out here that even though she herself is an Eishes Ach, and that doesn't bother us, the fact that her co-wife is an Eishes Ach, that's going to exclude her. So that's a very interesting point that comes out in this Gemara. It's a little of circular logic here.
Yeah. Can I see if I get that? Because I think I've got you. We're sort of recasting the tour of a tzara as it's the tzara of an erva.
Correct, and that's what we talked about in the
normally,
first, right?
Yeah, and normally the erva, we're not talking about the erva Eishes Ach because that's usually permitted in Yibum, sort of disappears and goes away. Exactly. And so that's not the erva of Eishes Ach is not going to patzer the tzara. Right. But in these cases, so I guess with the one of the one with the case of Maimar, mm-hmm. The Gemara cites the reason that it's Shenemar Umes Echad Mehem Yavama Yavo Aleha.
Right.
Misha Aleha Zikas Yavam Echad Velo Zika Shnei Yavamin. So really, that's the reason why she can't do Yibum. But whatever the reason is, now she defaults. If she can't do Yibum, then she sort of defaults to Eishes Ach.
Exactly.
And then once she's Eishes Ach, she's erva, and when she's erva, then her tzara is okay. Right.
So it's just a fascinating case where we have, these are the only two cases where Eishes Ach, which we would think, right, would never be an issue regarding Yibum, can actually come back into effect and not only cancel out her, but cancel out her tzara as well. So it's just a fascinating way this Gemara comes around here. Okay. I wanted to talk about a case as follows. The Gemara on Amud Beis. If we turn to Amud Beis, the Gemara says on Yud Beis, Amud Beis, about 6 lines down. Okay, so the Gemara brings a very interesting halacha. The Gemara says, Tani Rav Bibi Kamedu Rav Nachman. Rav Bibi taught in front of Rav Nachman, Shalosh Nashim Mishamshos B'moch. So there are 3 women, okay, that are permitted, or was, okay, 3 women that have intercourse b'moch with a contraceptive, okay, which in the time of the Gemara was simply they would take a rag or cloth and put it into the canal, and that would absorb any of the zera that it can't reach the womb, and she can't become pregnant. So it's saying that these 3 women have intercourse with a moch, ketana, a minor, me'uberes, a woman who's already pregnant, umenika, and a woman who's nursing. Okay, why is that? Ketana shema tis'aber v'shema tamus. A ketana, a minor, because she's so young that she might become pregnant, and if she does, it's dangerous to her health. She could die from it. Mu'beres shema tase ubo sandal, a woman who's pregnant because the second, if another pregnancy potentially were to take effect, it could destroy the original fetus. Menika shema tigno b'na v'yamos. And a woman who's nursing because potentially if she becomes pregnant again, that could cause her milk to dry up and the child could starve.
And just as a quick, I'm not aware of a current medical understanding of anything that would correlate with the second case.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to that a little bit. Yeah.
And which I don't know whether to categorize it. Should I think about it, or should I put it in the other category of like the things scientifically that I don't make sense necessarily, and I don't know how hard I should think about it. But
No. I'm going to come back to it actually. No,
okay. All right.
We're going to come back to it. I'm going to circle back to that point. Okay. So, and the Gemara then says, the Gemara just defines Ezuhi Katana. How do we define a katana in this regard to this halacha? So, Mibas Yud Aleph Shanim V'Yom Echad, Ad Yud Beis Shana V'Yom Echad, from the age of 11 and 1 day till 12 and 1 day. But less than that, there's no concern that she'll become pregnant at all. And older than that, she's already capable of having children. So, Mishameshes Kedarka V'Holeches, so then she has regular intercourse. Divrei Rabbi Meir, so this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, that these 3 women should have intercourse with a moch, with a contraceptive, to prevent them from becoming pregnant. Chacham say in all cases, they disagree with Rabbi Meir. They say there's no such exclusion for these 3 women. Rather, they have normal intercourse. And from heaven, they'll have mercy. From heaven, they should have mercy on them. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, Shomer Pesayim Hashem, that Hashem protects the fools. And therefore, they will have regular intercourse. And hopefully from heaven, they'll be merciful. Okay. Now, generally, we know, okay, that when we have a machlokas, okay, Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim, so halacha follows the rabbin, right? Halacha will follow the majority. Okay, so we seem to be walking out of this Gemara as saying that Rabbi Meir holds that in certain cases, it would be permitted for them to use this contraceptive because it's a danger to human life, and the Chacham disagree. And the Chacham say there's no such heter, and we'll say min hashamayim yiracham. Okay, so that's at face value. That's how the Gemara comes out. Okay, so there's a tshuva in the Igros Moshe from Rav Moshe Feinstein, and this is one of like the places where you get a glimpse of what. Just how incredible, how great Rav Moshe Feinstein was. Like, it's beyond the way he takes the whole sugya and just turns the whole thing around. It's just incredible. It's like watching an artist at work. It's just an amazing thing. So Rav Moshe says like this. He's asked the question that he was asked was a woman who came to him that she has a medical condition where the doctor said that if she becomes pregnant, right, then it can likely be fatal to her. Okay? If she becomes pregnant, it's an extreme danger to her life, and it could kill her. Okay, so the question now came to Rav Moshe: is she permitted to use contraception? Is she permitted to use contraception because there's a danger to her life? Okay, so Rav Moshe says as follows. Okay. And here's what's fascinating is Rav Moshe quotes a whole list of achronim, of great people, Rabbi Kiva Eger, Chassam Sofer, great achronim 200 years before him, who say that it's asur. And Rav Moshe says that, and who am I to argue with them? He says, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to argue anyways. He says, because he says potentially here we're talking about dissolving a marriage. He says, if I can't find a way to permit this woman to her husband, right, then the marriage can be destroyed. And he says the Torah tells us that in the parsha of Sota, right, the Torah tells us that Hashem says his name should be erased in order to create peace between husband and wife. So he says that if Hashem said his own name can be erased, then clearly there's no place to leave respect for the great generations before us, and I have to argue. So Rav Moshe says as follows. Okay, if we look back in our sugya, okay, there potentially could be two ways to understand the way Rav Meir's statement is. Rav Meir says, Shalosh nashim mishamshos b'moch. There are three women that have intercourse with contraception. Okay. Now Rashi says that the Rav Meir is to be understood to say that these women are permitted to have intercourse with contraception, and the Chachamim are saying they're not permitted to do so. Okay. Later we'll see Tosfos has a bit of a different view on this, but he starts off with Rashi's opinion. And Rav Moshe says, he says it doesn't make any sense. He says, how can it be, okay, that the Chachamim can disregard Pikuach Nefesh? Right, and it's an obvious question. People were shaking their heads before, right? How can it be that the Chachamim can say, what type of idea is this? Min hashamayim yirachamu. So since when, right? Do we just turn around and say, okay, from heaven they should be merciful, right? If a person has a medical emergency on Shabbos, do we turn around and say that okay, we're not going to be machal Shabbos, from heaven they should be merciful, min hashamayim yirachamu, right? It's ridiculous, right? So it says, how can it possibly be? It says that the Chachamim can just disregard the Pikuach Nefesh. It says it doesn't make any sense. It says we don't find anything like this anywhere in the Torah. So Rav Moshe says it can't be. It says clearly the Chachamim cannot argue on the concept of Pikuach Nefesh. Yet we see that the Chachamim say that she's not permitted to use the contraception. So how do we understand that? So Rav Moshe says something amazing. Okay, Rav Moshe says, and this goes back to what you just mentioned, Joaquin. It says Rav Moshe says that the Chachamim understood, okay, that if Hashem permitted marriage, and he permitted marriage to a katana, and he permitted marriage clearly when a woman is pregnant, and he permitted marriage when a woman is nursing, and part and parcel of the marriage is that there's a mitzvah of ona, there's a mitzvah of a husband to be with his wife, okay? Then it cannot be that the Torah would create a situation where the woman's life would be put at risk. Okay, so again, it cannot be that the Torah created this type of situation where the woman's life will be put at risk. So therefore, the Chachamim say that min hashamayim yirachamu means that we take it as a given, okay, that this will never happen. Okay, and in fact, right, like Joaquin was saying, right, that the likelihood, right, of of a woman becoming pregnant, of a katana becoming pregnant, right, or of something happening while a woman is already pregnant, right, or even by a menekes, even a woman who's nursing, it's highly unlikely that she'll become pregnant, right? So Rav Moshe says that the Chachamim are saying that we can take it as a given that min hashamayim yirachamu, that from heaven they are merciful, meaning that Hashem will not permit this to happen, okay, except for maybe, he says, 1 in a million cases, and if that happens, then it's only because he says that perhaps this was a gezerah, this was a punishment that was decreed on this person, but it's not something that will happen through natural occurrences. Okay, so if Moshe flips around the whole Gemara here, right? And this is only the beginning of it, but he flips around the whole Gemara. He says that of course the Chachamim are not disregarding Pikuach Nefesh. It says the Chachamim are saying that these three specific cases that Rabbi Meir is discussing, right? In these cases, we don't have to be concerned about Pikuach Nefesh, okay? Because from heaven they will protect her, because we can take as a given that these women will not come to harm. Okay.
I'm not sure I understand the first part of the answer.
Which one?
What exactly does he mean by asking the question? How could Hashem let a woman be married when she's pregnant or when she's
meaning
she's
that
nursing?
the mitzvah of Ona, right? The mitzvah of the husband.
What's the nafkamina that the marriage is?
What?
Is
In
it
other
not
words, the
when she's
mitzvah of
pregnant?
Ona, he's saying that the mitzvah of Ona, the mitzvah of the husband and wife having relations, still applies during pregnancy, right? And it can't be, right, that the Torah would put her in this situation where she would have this mitzvah, which would cause her life to be put in danger.
Right.
So therefore, the fact that it exists, right, it tells us that the Torah would not put her in this danger, and therefore there's not going to be this danger. However, says Rav Moshe, in our case, in the question that he was asked, he says, we're dealing with an out of the ordinary case. We're dealing with an extraordinary case. This is a woman where the doctors have told us medically that she is in danger of losing her life if she becomes pregnant, right? He says, of course, the Chachamim are going to agree. He says, there's no way that the Chachamim would possibly disagree and say, we don't care about the danger to human life.
But Rabbi Meir says that such a danger does exist.
Rabbi Meir says that such a danger does exist, and he goes through a few possible explanations for why Rabbi Meir would disagree. I'm just going to try. It's about a 25-page tshuva, so I'm just going to try and keep it short. But it's just the amazing parts where he flips around the whole idea at the beginning. He says, of course, the Chacham are not disagreeing with Rabbi Meir. He says the Chacham can't possibly dismiss the value of human life, the pikuach nefesh. He says the Chacham are saying in these three cases we're allowed to rely on heaven, and he says so much so that normally, of course, we have a rule that ain't somchin ala nes. A person is not permitted to rely on a miracle, right? A person can't refuse medical care and say I'm relying on God to heal me, right, as a miracle. He says in this case the Chacham said that this is not considered relying on a miracle. He says for these women to have normal intercourse is not considered relying on a miracle, and it's not considered putting their lives in danger whatsoever. Okay. Now, the question then, however, becomes as follows. So I'm sorry. So Rav Moshe then says, however, that in the case, the question where he's being asked, right, where medically clearly there is a danger to this woman's life. So says Rav Moshe that it's clear to him, absolutely clear to him, without a shadow of a doubt, that the Chachamim would not disagree. The Chachamim would say that, of course, we're going to regard the danger to human life, and it would be permitted. But then Rav Moshe asks another question, okay? And this is a question, somebody really should come up with this question. I'm going to wait. Somebody should be bothered by this question, right? Essentially, what the Gemara is saying is that we're going to permit these women to have intercourse with contraception, okay? Because when they have intercourse, they come into danger of becoming pregnant, right? And if they become pregnant, that presents a danger to their life, right? So now, since their life is going to be in danger, right, as a matter of pikuach nefesh, we're going to permit them to use contraception. Okay, that's essentially what the Gemara is saying. Okay, so there should be a very obvious question that's popping up here. Let's see. Somebody want to give it a shot?
Wait. So sorry, no, I don't have the question. I wasn't mechavan to the question, but wait, I thought that there were three different reasons, right? The danger to the woman's life was only by the katana, right? By the meuberes, it was the sandal, and by the manika, it was that the nursing child is going to die.
Correct. So it's a danger to human life, I should say, not necessarily
only the first one is
life,
the danger.
but it's a danger to the child's life, right?
And it sounds like that's kind of a separate than the tshuva that Rav Moshe talked about was just a general medical condition where pregnancy would be a threat to the woman's life.
Correct.
And even a gedola. Correct.
Rav Moshe is talking about a woman who had been married for many years, and something happened, and I don't know exactly. Right?
Okay. Can you rephrase your setup to see if
I'm going to set it up again. Somebody's got to come up with this question. Okay. So essentially, the Gemara is saying as follows, right? We're going to permit them to have intercourse with contraception because, right, when they have intercourse, they come into a position of danger because they could potentially become pregnant, right? And the becoming pregnant could present a danger to their life, right? Or in the Gemara, to the child's life, or whatever it is, right? And therefore, we're now faced with the situation of pikuach nefesh. And as a matter of pikuach nefesh, we're going to be allowed to use this contraception, right, to save human life.
The question
is the question. Oh,
you
go.
You go. You supplied the child. You go first. You have priority.
is the question that, especially in the days of the Gemara, childbirth just greta is extremely dangerous.
So Rav Moshe actually says that as one of his explanations for the Chachamim. He says part of why the Chachamim are able to say Min hashamayim yirachamu, from heaven they'll have mercy, is because anyways, right, childbirth is extremely dangerous in and of itself, and yet the Torah obligates us to take part in it. So therefore, you see that there's always a matter of risk involved, and we rely on heaven, so we could rely on heaven here as well. That is, Rav Moshe puts that logic in there actually as well. But that's not the question.
That's not the question. Okay, Max.
I guess just why are relations permitted in the first place?
Excellent. Exactly. Says Rav Moshe, right? Are we going to permit somebody to, right? He doesn't say this. My example, right? Are we going to permit somebody to carry a parachute on their back outside of an Eruv on Shabbos because they might decide to jump off a bridge, and if they do so, they'll be faced with pikuach nefesh, and then they'll need the parachute. Who told them to jump off the bridge? Says Rav Moshe, right? Wait a minute. Is the woman in any danger right now? There's no danger to her right now. What puts her in danger? Right? If she goes and she has intercourse, then she puts herself into a situation of danger, right? And then we have to deal with the ramifications of it. Moshe said, who said it? Who said it? She's permitted. So maybe the answer is, okay, don't have relations. Don't have intercourse. Don't put yourself into a situation of danger. Right? Okay, so it's a fantastic question. Rav Moshe says, I don't understand. Where were all the Rishonim and the Achronim? He says, nobody asked this question. So it doesn't make any sense to me. Right? So Rav Moshe is astonished by this question. How could nobody ask this question? Okay.
Can I add to the question a point that I don't quite understand also?
What?
Can I add to the question a point that I don't understand?
Yeah, please.
So if she's using a moich, then it's in order not to get pregnant.
Right.
So where's the mitzvah anyway?
Oh, okay.
There's a mitzvah puravu if she's not going to get pregnant.
Okay, good. So let's go step by step. Right.
Whereas, as an expansion of that point, is why are you allowed to live with? Why are you allowed to marry an Islandess or any of those women who can't have children?
Excellent. So all of them are very good points. Right. So let's go slowly. The way Rav Moshe goes through it. So the answer to Akiva Meir's question is that in addition to the mitzvah of puravu, right, even if a couple already has children, right, and they're not obligated in puravu any longer, there's a mitzvah of ona, right? There's a mitzvah. A husband is obligated to have relations, to be with his wife, and that is part and parcel of marriage. So it's a mitzvah in and of itself. Okay, so even if we're going to separate the concept of puravu, you still have the mitzvah of ona. Okay, so that's where the mitzvah is here. Now, the Rav Moshe says like this. Let's go back a step. What was the problem that we're trying to work around? Right, we're saying that we're going to permit, right, this woman to use contraception. What's the problem? Why? What do we have to permit? What's the isser? Okay. So the isser is. Okay, the isser is what the Gemara is saying. The isser is hashchasa zera, right? The isser is letting the seed go to waste, right? So, and the isser of hashchasa zera is considered a very serious isser in the Torah, right? And it's forbidden, right, for a man to be mashchiz zera, right, to let a seed go to waste. So the problem is that he's having intercourse in a way which cannot lead to pregnancy. Right, and therefore that would potentially be considered hashchasa zera. Okay, that's the problem. That's the problem. And what we're attempting to do is to work around that by saying that it should be permitted because of pikuach nefesh. Right, that was the original problem in the Gemara, and the answer was pikuach nefesh. So on that says Rav Moshe, right, that who says that's a heter? So maybe don't start to begin with. Right? Maybe relations shouldn't be permitted at all. So Rav Moshe says an amazing idea, okay? He says, it's revolutionary, and he basically comes up with it himself. He says that it's clear to me that what we have to say is as follows, okay, that we say this concept of hashchasa zera motzi zera levatola, okay, does not mean the way we would normally understand it, that it means that because it does not lead to pregnancy. Okay, he says that what it means is that it's without the performance of a mitzvah from the Torah. Okay, meaning that it's not in the performance of a mitzvah. He says, however, okay, once we can say that what he's doing is a mitzvah, and we're saying that it's an ona, so like Yassi just mentioned before, the same way the Torah permits a man to be married to a woman who's known to be barren, she can't have children, right? Or even an islandess, a woman who's not even physically, her body is not even capable of having children, right? And there we say that despite the fact that we know she's not going to have children, nevertheless, right, they're permitted to have relations, and it's a mitzvah of ona in the Torah, okay? So says Rav Moshe that therefore that what we're saying is that any time, okay, the zera is for the sake of the performance of a mitzvah, okay, then it's no longer considered hotzah zera levatala. Okay, so which completely revolutionizes the whole idea here. Okay, so says Rav Moshe that you're right. There's no way that that these relations can lead to pregnancy because of the moch that's here, right? Because of the moch that's placed there. Nevertheless, it's considered a mitzvah in the Torah. It's a mitzvah of ona, okay? And therefore, right, Rabbi Meir is saying that it's permitted because the relations themselves are permitted. Why are they permitted? Because it's a mitzvah. Now you're faced with a potential of a risk to human life. So to that we can say, oh, now you're permitted to use a moch. Right now, you're permitted to use a moch, and even though we know going into it that you're going to use the moch, and there's going to be contraception, it's never going to lead to pregnancy. It's still a mitzvah, and it's not considered hotzah zera levatala. Okay, that's the tremendous chidush that Rav Moshe comes up with. Okay, and Rav Moshe says that therefore that would transfer over into our case as well, right? Into the question that he was asked. Okay, that if he has this woman who now is faced with where the doctors have said that this would be life-threatening to her. Okay, so then again, relations are permitted because that's a mitzvah in the Torah. Okay, and therefore, once we say that it's considered a mitzvah, okay, and the only possible way for them to be able to have relations is through using a moch, okay, through using the contraception, because otherwise it would be too dangerous, then that itself becomes part and parcel of the mitzvah of ona, and that's permitted. And that's permitted because it goes into the mitzvah of ona, and once we say that it's part of the mitzvah of ona, it's no longer considered hotzah zera levatala any longer, okay, even though it's clear without a shadow of a doubt that it can't possibly lead to pregnancy. So with this, basically, Rav Moshe overturns the psak of Rabbi Kiva Eger, the psak of the Chassam Sofer, the psak of many others, and Rav Moshe comes up with his own revolutionary idea, and Rav Moshe says that therefore he's giving a permission for this woman to go ahead and use contraception, because on his understanding of the sugya, even though at face value it appears that the sugya is the Chachamim are disagreeing with Rabbi Meir, we're actually going to say the opposite. We're going to say the Chachamim are going to agree with Rabbi Meir, and it's going to be completely permitted. Rav Moshe says that, however, that this only applies in a case where normal relations are not permitted, are not possible. Sorry, not possible. Okay, meaning in a case of a normal healthy person, right? In a case of a normal healthy person, where normal relations are permitted. So then using the contraception is not for the sake of maintaining relations, right? It's simply for the sake of preventing pregnancy for no reason that's necessary for the relations, then you don't have this heter any longer, says Rav Moshe, right? And in that case, right, a moch would not be permitted. But in a case where there's a danger, then the moch would be completely permitted. Rav Moshe says that according to the way he's understanding this, he says all the Rishonim will agree with this opinion, with the exception of Tosfos. Okay, so Tosfos, if you look at Tosfos in our Gemara, so Tosfos here distinguishes. He says there's two possibilities for how this moch might be used. Okay, it says in Rashi's understanding of the moch is inserted before relations. Okay, so that the zera gets automatically absorbed, right, and it can't penetrate into the womb. Tosfos says, according to Rabbeinu Tam, that would absolutely be forbidden. There's no way that would be permitted whatsoever, because it's clear it's considered that would be considered hashchas zera, because there's no possible way. It's not considered normal relations whatsoever. Okay, now, however, Tosfos says what the Gemara means of mishameshes b'moch means for the woman to insert a moch after relations, and then to absorb whatever zera is there. But that means at the time of relations, right, the relations were done normally in a manner which could potentially lead to pregnancy. And the Rabbeinu Tam says that there it's permitted. And not only is it permitted, but he says that according to Rabbi Meir, what we mean to say is that she's obligated to use the moch because there's a danger to her life. But Rabbeinu Tam says that if the moch was inserted beforehand, then there's no way it would be permitted whatsoever. So Rav Moshe says that the only dissenting opinion is the opinion of Tosfos here, but all other Rishonim and Achronim, he says, are going to, all other Rishonim are going to agree with his opinion that that any time the purpose is for the performance of a mitzvah of ona, then that's not considered hashchas zera at all, and therefore without a question they're permitted to engage in relations, and once they do so, then we have a situation of pikuach nefesh, and that allows her to use the contraception. But we're not going to say that maybe you don't have permission to engage in relations at all, because it's not going to be considered hashchasas zera at all. Okay, that is the basic idea. Rav Moshe goes on for about another 20-30 pages, but that's the basic idea, and it's just it's fascinating the way he takes the whole sugya and flips it completely backwards and brings out completely the opposite idea whatsoever. Okay.